happens.
My apologies, I forgot to turn on the recorder. This is the OGM Weekly Call on Thursday, September 11th, 9/11, 2025. Go ahead, Gil.
So to Scott's provocation of, I remember it as him wondering whether collaboration ever happens, not whether it ever succeeds. And it seems to me fairly obvious that it happens all the time and always has.
Oh, I was puzzled by
Whether it
what
succeeds is the
by his
question.
definition of collaboration. He seemed perhaps to be holding the word in a different way than I'm holding it, and maybe others of us are holding it. And I was really curious what he meant by it.
Could you tell us both of those ways?
Uh, I, I don't want to speak for him. I was trying to channel him when I wrote the invite, uh, but I'm not sure. Kevin, please.
Yeah, I talked to him about it because we're starting to do something together with John Warner related to Plex. And his definition of collaboration is when two different groups with their own goals collaborate on something that doesn't divert them from what they're doing.
Mm.
And I said, well, I'm working on affordable housing in Swannanoa, and I've got like 5 different groups working on that one thing from different perspectives. One is got a grant from Gates for a third place because we don't have any place people can gather anymore. There's no supermarket, there's no restaurant, there's no post office, there's no fire, there's no hardware. There's nothing where people can gather. So a third place as a place to then work on housing. And so there's lots of different groups working on that problem. He said, no, what I mean is groups that are having their own goals and finding a way to bridge that. And I said, yeah, I've done that a lot. And you get, Barney, I like you, you like me, but nobody changes from their own goals. Occasionally it's like you have ships going by and you can lower a drawbridge from each ship to the other and you get a little bit across, but nobody, if they've got a goal going that way and you've got a goal going that way, it does. To me, it doesn't happen. But that's what he was thinking, that groups with their own purpose would collaborate on something between them in some way. And I just have not ever seen it that the way he's talking about it.
So it sounds like a pretty narrow definition of collaboration. It's groups with cross missions or something like that. I'm reminded, I think I told this story on an OGM call long ago, but in Management 101, we had the ugly oranges negotiation case, and the class was divided in two. Each half got the case, and basically the situation is there is a shipment of the last available ugly oranges on the planet. They are unique oranges, special characteristics, and you need to buy the shipment of oranges. You have a $1 million budget, no more than $1 million. You have to buy the shipment. There's another group that is competing because they also want to buy the oranges. So you got to figure out you need the pith of the peel to make a serum that's going to cure cancer. And I'm going to completely spoil the plot. The other team needs the juice of the oranges. And it's up to the negotiators to figure out they could pay $1 for the shipment and spend $999,999 on research, and just split the oranges because they don't need the same thing from the oranges. So it was really enlightening because it made you investigate any negotiation and go, what the heck is it that we want or need? Like it's a very nice, memorable case to illustrate. Like sometimes people that look like they're in great contention, because the negotiation typically gets really contentious really fast because they both think they need all of the oranges. Anyway, back
out of curiosity, was the juice for something spectacular like curing cancer, or was it just to quench my thirst?
No, I think it's always like curing cancer or some big noble goal. That's part of it. And I think I'll look it up in my brain. I'm pretty sure the ugly oranges case is chronicled online, and very, very findable. So I'll put a link to it in a sec. But off to you, Mike.
I was intrigued by his question too, and confused. I thought the focus was more on individuals collaborating or small groups in different organizations collaborating. So maybe what Kevin said and what I'm thinking are consistent. But the skepticism I heard was at the end of the day, somebody kind of makes critical decisions about what goes forward. And so the idea of some melding of the minds and this new organism is now doing things that could not be done individually that we sometimes talk about uh, is something we probably should be skeptical about. I've heard so many cases where, you know, 5 people go, oh, let's all collaborate on this. And in the end, one person does 80% of the work and 4 people take all the credit. You know, and actually some of those 4 people are actually getting in the way and making silly suggestions and delaying the process. So I think in the end you need a champion. Oh, here's Scott. He can describe what's going
Oh,
on.
good.
But the fact that we should all be skeptical of collaboration for collaboration's sake. And we should all understand that at the end of the day, different people need to take on different responsibilities. And most likely, the most important thing you get is a deadline and somebody who has a real motivation to get it done. Because otherwise, collaborations can wander and wander and wander. And as Kevin said, different groups can push it in different directions and avoid consensus. But Scott, we're debating your thesis without you here.
Yes.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm sorry I'm late. As you probably all have guessed, I'm usually working while I'm doing these calls. So
Yep.
I've managed to get off the other stuff for a moment to come and talk with you about my odd thoughts about collaboration. So the meme that I pulled up is Inigo Montoya. You keep using that word. I don't think that means what you think that means. And that's been a theme of mine is when I hear, especially in organizational culture, I hear a lot of words that I think, what does that mean? Oh, we need to communicate. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about what that means. So for me, collaboration, what I started to notice was that it seemed to be used synonymously with let's get together and work. And actually, the root of it was work together. Collaboration is from the Latin 2 words that mean work together. And I thought, ostensibly, that means anytime two or more people are doing something, that means it's collaboration. And I thought, I don't think that's how we're using it. Like, I don't think that when I say I want to collaborate with someone, that just means you and I are going to work on something together. And the best example that I came up with in the last 24 hours was a restaurant. I consider the head chef and the restaurateur to have a collaboration in developing the restaurant and the menu and the experience. I do not consider the kitchen day to day, where they are executing the recipes that have already been created, to be a collaborative environment. I consider that teamwork. Everyone has a role, there's a set plan, and I know that we love our distinctions, right? So I'm throwing this out as a hypothesis that there's a difference between collaboration and teamwork. And I've been thinking one of the ways I can get to it is the idea of a collaboration as a noun, which to me is an end result created by unique individuals pairing up or grouping up. And that if you change the individuals, you fundamentally change the collaboration, which is not true with teamwork. We can take one person out, put another person in, and the role, if they're doing the same role, is a bucket brigade. And we absolutely need teamwork. Someone's in charge, someone sets the vision, and we all fulfill our role. With a collaboration, we typically name the individuals, name the organizations because they are unique. And if you take one out and put another one in, it's a different thing. So my thought is I have rarely seen, and I'll be done in just a second here, I've rarely seen what I consider true collaboration, which is a couple of minds getting together with a shared vision who create something that they couldn't create separately, not because of manpower, but because of the unique interaction of those two individuals. I think we talk about collaboration, but we really are saying teamwork. And that my observation has been that most of the time it's one person's vision and other people are getting on board, as opposed to two people coming together and saying, we're making something that we both have the same vision on. And my test has been, if the people who are collaborating can't say what they're doing in the same way, maybe they're not actually collaborating.
So,
So
Scott, thank you very much for deepening that. So I think from what you just said that the Hollywood movie making mechanism, where a bunch of people come together, one of whom is the gaffer and the best boy and the grip and all that, that is teamwork but not collaboration, because each of those people have an assigned role. They all know exactly what that role is, and they are plug and playable. Is that right?
that is correct.
However, if the director is Mike Leigh, who relies on his collaboration with the actors to invent the script as they come together into their roles, that is collaboration.
I agree with that, because if you had a different actor, it would be they would bring something different to it.
Yes, and Mike, this is Mike Leigh's particular MO, his unique MO in movie making, and there's maybe a couple other directors that do this, but he relies on it completely. And I think that it lives up to the spirit of collaboration that you're pointing to.
I agree with
Gil.
that. And I think when you are coming into a collaborative, when someone's at the reason I brought this up to begin with is I believe when people are asking for collaboration, I don't think that they really want that actor to say, here's what I want. They just want the actor to kind of follow the director's vision. And I don't know if that's true. That's why I asked the question.
I think there's some range of relationships between actors and directors, and each director is quirky in their way, but some directors are really permeable to actors going, no, I don't think this is working, let's do this instead. And then they're like, go. And other directors like, yeah, no, you do exactly what I said, and with the nuances that I just gave you. And then the notes, apparently passing notes to people is a thing in movie making. So thank you. But we have a whole mess of people in the queue. So Gil.
And other actors and directors start from the premise of let's invent this together. And
like Mike Leigh, that's what I mean.
Like Mike Leigh and many others, and I was just watching a conversation last night between Robert Ickey and Andrew Scott about the magnificent Hamlet they did at the Almeida Theater a few years ago, which was very much collaborative. I mean, they said, let's work together on something. What should we work on together? And they finally chose Hamlet as the target, and then they invented the play. So, I think that fits with what Scott's talking about. And in my experience, is far more common, Scott, than maybe in your experience. Whether it's in, human relationships or people starting companies or cutting deals or building united fronts against fascism or what have you. I think there's been lots of whatever this is in human experience. But I'm saying whatever this is, 'cause this is feeling like a very problematic conversation because we're talking about two overlapping things. One is the nature of human interaction for common purpose, and the other is the word labels that we are giving to different types of human interaction. I suspect that many of us may have very different definitions of what collaboration, cooperation, coordination, compromise, and other things actually means. So I'm very wary of having a debate about words where we're using the words in different ways about meanings of different things that we aren't even clear about. So I don't know where to go with this conversation. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Gil.
Except to say again, like my experience in life seems to be very different than Scott's experience in life about people working together.
Which is, I think, a really interesting thing to explore given this theme. I like that vector a lot. Alex.
Right. I think by the time I came across it just now, I think you've kind of covered everything. So my initial definition or understanding of collaboration is where I work with people on an equal basis to problem solve or whatever, and as a team or as the interaction between collaborative parties gives off new ideas, new tacks, or whatever. So it's different from what I suspect what you guys covered is teamwork. But I just cheated and I went to AI and I said, what are the different types of collaboration? There's about 30 of them in there. You know, just take your pick. You mentioned a lot of them. And my personal thing about collaboration is not the who's the chief, who's this role, who's that role. It's, you know, it's more like social community goal type of collaboration. It's that end of it. Or in this case of building products using AI, IT, or whatever, it's working together to do. It's not a hierarchical thing. So anyway, that's basically where I stand on collaboration. And I'm interested in this because I never thought there was another meaning to it, like the one Scott put across.
A meta question for this conversation. Is this conversation a collaboration on exploring the word collaboration? But we don't need to answer that right now. Let's go to Jose.
Thanks for throwing that question into my brain just to confuse me a little bit more.
Hey, anything we can do.
So to Scott's point about the definitions, I myself have sort of used a similar two different definitions, but similar to what Scott is describing with cooperation and collaboration. In corporate, I think most organizations are good at doing cooperation. Teams work together, but they do so independently. They don't do it together, right? They're not actually working together. You do your side, I do my side, we pass it along. My department passes it to your department, my team passes it to your team. This one individual does some work, passes it to the other individual. So it's very sort of linear in the way that it works. I, in corporate, rarely saw the what I call true collaboration. And to me, that means, I think, closer to what Scott's talking about, where we sort of work together in the moment, developing something together at the same time, not as a handoff type of situation. You go do your task, I'll go do my task, that kind of thing. And I think that, you know, having done a bunch of startups and having partners, it's rare. I disagree with Gil. It's rare that you get that true kind of collaboration where both parties sort of just, both or more, sort of drop a lot of their ego, whatever it might be, to sit down together and actually let the juices roll and like feed off of each other and support one another, and like, yeah, I like that idea, let's do this, and I like that, and let's do that. And so that kind of thing I found doesn't happen as often as I would have liked in my career. And that what does happen is more of the cooperation than the collaboration. So that's my view on, that's the language I use. I'm not trying to define anything for anybody. That's just my experience and definition of those terms and what comes of them in true efforts that I've participated in. That's it.
Thank you. Kevin.
You know, hundreds of social entrepreneurs who were scholarshiped at SOCAP, they would use the word coordination. And I wanted to learn to step back from that. And I buy into Ronald Coase's transaction theory. He's the one that came up with the theory of the firm as well. And he said, you start with discovery, who's doing what? Then you find one-off cooperations that work in that instance. And coordination is where signals are automated. It's like where train tracks are, exchanges are, everybody agrees on the role and it's not revisited again. And you get there, when you've decided that the width of the train tracks will be the same and you don't have to offload from the Vanderbilt's tracks to the folks doing the Erie Canal. Coordination requires limitation within accepted limits within those groups. And it's a restraint that causes things to flow easily and quickly. And so I just, when people say, what's coordination? Well, it is where social entrepreneurs express their delusion of how they will change the world, and realizing that coordination is the third step after you know who's doing what and who's doing something like you and how you explain yourself versus the other folks, and where the differentiation goes. And it also has to be in where you realize who's your partner and who's your stakeholder. Your partners are like the folks in Swananoa. They're working on housing. The stakeholders are folks who have validation and resources that we want to access. They are not on our team. We're trying to get their resources into our universe of solving this problem of 1,000 people lost houses. And so, you have to know who your partners are and who your stakeholders are, and how to get to the folks with power, influence, and resources to the group that is partnering and cooperating and collaborating. Partnering and collaborating, I don't see as different. I always work with groups, and Scott does individuals. And because I've discovered that, I'm not the on the ground person, but I can help the folks who are working figure out the resources and who needs to be at the table. And so you have to know your role when you are, when I tried to solve malaria in Mozambique and Swaziland, I discovered I was uniquely bad as a community organizer, but I was good at getting the resources to the folks doing the work. And I've stopped trying to be the guy on the ground. And so you have to know where you work. And I'm extremely effective one step up, and I'm extremely bad down at the level where I failed at malaria and all the other things where I failed like that. So I think about this a lot because I do it a lot.
Thanks for your reflections, Ken. Doug.
Yeah, so I want to just sort of offer a drop out of the industrial and noun version to sort of a slightly more semantic question and level. So human beings coming together to co-create together, or to solve a collective challenge together. For me, that question, Scott, about collaboration really tickled something that I've spent a huge amount of time over the last several years searching for, sort of like a truffle, which is there a paradigmatically different way of relating to co-creating together that doesn't have all these industrial age afflictions, like ownership, power over, ego, attachment, fear, scarcity? Like that whole bucket that I just listed is a direct growth out of an industrialization and nouning of the world, and relating to human beings not as living emotional creatures, but as machine parts. And if you float above the industrial one, if you let go of all of those drivers, which are all sort of brainstem territory, if you can actually sort of not have those running the show, not have those being the contextual rules and constraints, some really interesting possibilities open up. And I have actually, so just to bring rubber to the ground, rubber meeting the road. So there's a young woman in Nigeria. She's an attorney, 30 years old. She created a nonprofit foundation to help women entrepreneurs, more specifically women coming out of domestic violence situations. And her foundation doesn't relate proprietarily to the women that she helps. It's sort of a conduit, it's a pipeline, it's a funnel, and she spends as much time networking with other organizations and entities and agencies and stuff that connect to those women that she's helping as beneficiaries. So she's conduit, she's part conduit, she's part service provider, direct service provider, she's resource intrinsic herself. And I think about so many of the nonprofits and NGOs that I've crossed paths with that are afflicted with a kind of proprietariness about we're the sole source of the help that we're providing to the beneficiaries that we point to that we're serving. And they're closed systems, and other NGOs in the same space are competitors, which again is back to that industrial frame and orientation. So I really think the inquiry is, can we co-create together, not from scarcity, but from abundance, not from hard boundaries and proprietary, assertion of power or authority or control or scarcity around resources and all that stuff. But can we actually come from a place of, of porous boundaries, of openness, of curiosity, of appreciation of the ecosystem of folks that we find ourselves in the middle of because everybody has an affinity around the same things they're trying to solve for as a value add in the world. So with that, I'm complete.
Doug, thank you very much for your provocations. I love the angle of, can we step outside sort of the Western object noun oriented thing, ownership thing, and go back to other examples. Scott, feel free to jump in between what anybody says. You've posed the question for us, so I feel like you have free reign to jump in and out whenever you want. And I just want to add something as an example of, I think, an example of what Doug just gave us, which comes from the book The Biggest Estate on Earth: How the Aborigines Made Australia, in which Bill Gammage describes how 2/3 of the landmass of Australia was under active human management before the first fleet arrives, before European convicts and other people arrive. 2/3 of the place, and basically the tribes were quite mobile, but it's like when April and I were in Mongolia, the families that half the population lives out on the steppe, half the population is in the one big city, Ulaanbaatar. People out on the steppe move 3 times a year. They have winter quarters, they have sort of different quarters, and they're busy grazing their animals and doing whatever. But in Australia, you would drop some spinifex near the forest. You might thin the forest a little bit, but you knew that kangaroos love spinifex. So if you plant a bunch of spinifex just outside the forest, you know that they're going to be feeding there next time you come around. And it might be another tribe that catches, some of the kangaroos, and nobody's going to take all the kangaroos because there's a lot of them. But you're busy managing all different parts and aspects in complementary ways with no sense of there's a fence here and this plot is mine and not yours. Like not at all. It's just like we're all managing this place. And what's dramatic is that I think it's pretty sure it's this book, he describes reading the diaries of the first fleet. And he reads the diaries of these gentlemen who bring their horses ashore and start riding around in the forest. And they're like, this is like a gentleman's forest. You reach up and there's an apple. You look down and there's a gourd. Oh my gosh, the state of nature in Australia must be very different from, England or whatever. And it's like, yeah, no, that was actually the active collaboration. And this is why I'm raising the question, is this collaboration? These are hands-off. These are people who've developed these practices over possibly 30,000 years. That seem to work really well, that fail once somebody brings sheep and lets the sheep loose on the landscape by the way to go graze. Like it suddenly dawns on me, oh my God, the sheep on these first ships go tear up this man-made landscape, and you can't really stop them. Nobody wants to put fence because it's not about fences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's a fascinating riddle about how do you have a continent as big as Australia that is doing, I think, really pretty well before the first fleets show up, uh, and how do you preserve any of that once capitalism objects, the things that Doug was just critiquing for us, fall into the space and eat it? Because capitalism is quite voracious, uh, and doesn't really like to coexist with other systems. So it will take up all that space. Sorry to go so long, but I love the example, and I was very struck when I read about sort of Aboriginal practices. And I'm on the quest for how do we steward instead of own in modern times, right? How do we drag some of this forward into today? Because it seems to me to be a highly practical abundance creation machine that is very social and passed from people to people.
What was the name of the book again?
It's in the chat. The Biggest Estate on Earth.
Oh, Estate. Okay.
Yeah, Biggest
gonna
Estate.
drop
Bill
in-
Gamm. Go ahead.
I want to drop in something to actually conflict with where Doug went. He said that nonprofits have an industrial frame. They don't. They have an artificially scarcity-induced mindset by foundation program grants. I was working with food systems in Oakland, and Kellogg, I think, put up $10 million if they could agree on it. And nobody could because they all had to report upstream to the program grant manager's theory of change and size of the thing. And so they had to give back the 10 million. And it's, foundations are profoundly dysfunctional. And, they have no predators and they don't evolve, but they keep cooperation between nonprofits limited because of the oppressiveness of program grants, the colonial nature of program grants. So that's just, it's not industrial. It's the philanthropic industrial complex.
I want to check in with Scott. Do you want to jump in on anything? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Sean.
Very quickly, there was a wonderful little side conversation between Jerry and Gil about jazz combo, and I think it fits with my thesis. I would say a jazz quartet is a collaboration because if you change the musicians, it changes the outcome. And one of the reasons I say that is that we name the musicians. And in a marching band, we typically do not name the musicians. We name the team. And so I would say that a marching band is cooperation and teamwork, but I wouldn't consider it collaboration. And the second thing is that I put an engram because I enjoy the engrams, and I started looking at. I found it funny that the rise of collaboration, which happened, looks like after the 80s, the rise of the collaboration coincided with the fall of Deadline. And it also coincided with the rise of iterative. So there might have been I know some of you are more involved in the software side of things. It feels like that kind of relates in some way because I know that one group will get interested in, oh, we're now doing a waterfall model. And then another industry will pick that up, even though they're doing something completely different, it doesn't fit. They're using it. And I think my main thing is people using the word collaboration is far greater than the people who are actually collaborating or actual true collaborative situations. And I don't know if that's true, but that's my thought.
Thanks, Scott. Sean, thank you for your patience.
When Scott made his remarks last week, I really I really perked up because that is strongly my experience, that we're really challenged to collaborate in a deep way, and Jerry's recent remarks here and Doug's I deeply resonate with as well. I think the conditions for profound collaboration are so delicate, and the procedures needed to actually accomplish the development of the shared understandings and the shared conception of what's even the language game that we're playing here together in this moment. What are we doing now in this conversation? And what do the words that come out of my mouth and your mouth mean, and which are the same. And even though some of them might be the same, are our meanings, are the meanings that we attach to those words sufficiently equivalent so that we can move forward without further definition, refinement, clarification. And then what are our goals? What are our objectives? What do we come to this engagement offering and asking and intending? It's such an incredibly subtle dance, and I would submit that that as the number of participants in the conversation grow, there's a violent cliff right after 2. Great big cliff, really big cliff, and that was the thing. That was the thing that really yeah, Scott. So that was part of what you were saying, right? And that is a really big issue for me. But after 2, then what happens is that when there's a third person who remarks or feels a need to participate or gets impatient or takes us off on a tangent or whatever, then the subtle dance that's going on between a 2 is disrupted, and the mind melding that's absolutely critical to the unification of understanding and purpose and intent that is elemental, fundamental to true collaboration is disrupted. And so in a group of this size, there's, however gifted, however resonant, however well-intentioned the participants, it's more like a playground and there's a bunch of stuff that happened rather than there really being the possibility of the deep harmonization of understanding that has to be the foundation for profound shared purpose in action. I have so much more to say, but whoop.
I'm so excited because you expressed that in a way that I haven't been able to, and that makes me excited that we're all talking about this because I can see all the points on the different sides. Everyone is engaged in it, and I think your cliff is a brilliant metaphor. So thank you for that.
And I kind of want to disagree and agree with what Sean was just saying in the sense of I think that broader collaborations are sort of rare. And Brian Eno coined the term scenius, or like when bands start composing things together. Look at the short video clip that I posted in the chat. It's Eno explaining what he meant by scenius. Other people have picked up the term scenius. And scenius is a scene that has genius. It's it's a squeezing together of those words, but I think that there are moments there where there are communities of co-creators that have scenius. It's just that they're kind of precious. And I think that our fear of the cliff, or our dread of the cliff of 2, as I will dub it, is that it's very hard to somehow get a group to cross over into scenius. You certainly can't force it to. And then there's something about that degree of collaboration that involves the dropping of egos and the permeability to other people's ideas, which are not the same thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Beatles individually had pretty big egos, but they managed to blend their skills and crafts and understandings of what they wanted to make in a genius way. So the Beatles, I think, had scenius, and the things that they composed over time. I think Scott's head just exploded.
It's collective flow. That's what I haven't been able to say.
Okay.
Collective flow, where you said it, Jerry, you lose the sense of self because it's like, man, we're in sync, and it's so delicate and it's so rare, as Sean has said. And my initial comment was because I feel like we say, no, collaboration is everywhere. And I'm like, no, it's so precious.
Right. And you're basically helping us appreciate and raise the specialness of this kind of collaboration, a word that we would normally just sort of chuck around. So I like that. Thank you for that gift into this conversation. Herr Nelson.
Just a couple small comments. I do think it's helpful to do what Scott just did, which was distinguish between real-time together activities and longer-term multi-person collaborations that could be seamless, but may not be synchronous. It may be that there's a group that's really aligned, and one person can send an email from Hong Kong, and somebody will pick it up a few hours later in Kenya, and the thread or the listserv will just explode with great new ideas that would not be possible with individuals. But I wanted to point to the work that John Seeley Brown did probably 20 years ago about swarm innovation and swarm manufacturing in China. And he was struck by the fact that you had these Chinese factories that were pumping out Honda motorcycles for the Japanese. They did that by day. And then by night, both the people in the factory and the people in the factories that built the little machine parts that went into the Honda were swarming together and finding ways to make those parts a little cheaper, a little faster, a little better, even make them last longer. And they were producing a Honda knockoff at night that was half the price and twice as good. It was really funny. It was almost like united by a desire to rip off the Japanese. They were stealing the intellectual property, and they didn't have any intellectual property between them. That was to the point made earlier about IP being a huge barrier to the selfless sharing of ideas. But I thought their case studies were right on target, and it may be kind of special to that arrangement, and it may be that a lot of other types of collaboration are not going to be as easy to instigate, because clearly in that case, people weren't even meeting face to face that much. They were often just sending over a part and saying, "Hey, what do you think? This looks better to me." And because they were united by common cause and common language and common desire to make more money, they could do it. I don't think that's just coordination. It seems to me more of a collaboration. The other point I wanted to make, and speaking of the Chinese, there's a brand new book out in the last week called Breakneck: The Chinese Quest to Engineer the Future. And if you don't want to read the book, watch some of the podcasts with the author. They're popping up in lots of places. But the thing that's been getting lots of attention, particularly in the review in the Wall Street Journal, is his punchline, which was, China has put engineers in charge who want to construct. America has become a lawyerly society where the goal is to obstruct. And the book is just full of case after case after case of where the American system has just gotten in its own way. For good goals, we want fairness, we want environmental protection, we want all these things, but we're not doing it in a way that works. We're often giving one lawyer working for one client the ability to shut down a $10 billion project for years. And that may be one reason the book's getting lots of attention, but I think the better reason is we should all read it and just be a little bit concerned and scared about the future of our investment portfolio if it's basically 80% in American stocks and bonds. Just a thought.
Love that thought. Thanks, Mike. Ken.
Um, My take on collaboration has to do with conversation. And I come at it through that door because in the early 2000s, I was looking at, I work with clients who are very skilled, very well resourced, very intelligent, and very well intentioned, and yet they're not able to bring in their projects on time and on budget. Why is that? It's not because they lack good intentions, not because they lack skill, not because they lack resources. And when I took my coach training, I was taught a good coach identifies what the person wants to do and then identifies the competencies that that person needs in order to complete what they want to do. So I started to look at teams. I said, these people do not have conversational competency. They don't have the right conversation about the right thing at the right time with the right people. So that led me to asking myself, is there a minimum set of conversations that will allow a team to take something from concept through to completion? And if so, what is that? I came up with 4 conversations. And what I noticed is that most people start with conversation 3, which is why so many things tend to break down. Conversation 3 is the one they teach you in business school. It's the coordination of actions. What's the goal? What's the timeline? What's the critical path? How do you allocate resources? Blah, blah, blah. But if you haven't built relationships, if you haven't explored how to work together in ways that are fulfilling, then you're going to have a lot of problems with that third conversation. So the first conversation is, why are we here? What's this thing we're attempting to do? Why is it important to you? Jerry, what do you bring to it? Mike, what do you bring to it? Stacy, what do you bring to it? What do you want to get out of it? Why are you here? How does it relate to you in a way that actually is part of who you are? And if you're working in a company where you really don't want to be, you're not going to be a good collaborator. So first you identify what I call, you share what's meaningful. And at the end of the shared meaning conversation, everyone has a sense of commonality. You'll also hear things that really don't apply to you, but that's fine because you've listened very carefully to, these are the things that we all agree on are important. And then I usually do some improv exercises, get people's brains warmed up and explore what's possible. I was working with a bunch of bankers and they're like, we don't have a choice. We have to obey these very stringent rules. And I said, well, what if you could actually step outside those rules? What if you had an unlimited budget, could suspend the laws of physics? We did some improv exercises. They came up with several ways that would allow them to meet the rules and still do the work in ways that would allow them to feel that it was innovative on their part, that it was fulfilling, that it was growing them as people, growing them as professionals. This gets into Dan Pink's work on people want purpose, autonomy, and mastery, right? So you bring that in and you generate a bunch of possibilities. And you say, now we do have real world constraints. We have budgets, we have rules, regulations. So of this cloud of possibilities, which one stands the best chance of succeeding? And you choose that, and everyone has to say, it's not my first choice, but I will work on it. I'll give it my all. Because if you're not, you're a whole draining stuff out. So yes, we're all going to work on that. Then you do the third conversation of coordinating your collective actions. And then the last conversation is one I always get pushback on. You do an after action review, which begins with who needs to be acknowledged for their work. And the answer is everyone who contributed. If you don't do that, people get very upset. And you look at, what do we do that we can replicate that taught us a good lesson that's really valuable? What do we do that didn't fail, but that did something completely unexpected? I never use the word failure because failure is a very freighted word and it evokes things for people that are not pleasant. So, we attempted to do X and think it would bring us to Y, but it brought us to C prime. Why was that? What do we learn from that? And what competencies do we develop as individuals and a team that will serve us? If we're going forward as a team, how can we use what we learned here to be more effective next time? And if we're breaking up and going somewhere else, what are we bringing that we can bring to our next team that will help them? And then you get a nice little learning circle. And it's a complete, there are other conversations, but those are the main conversations that coordinate work. This is specifically focused on work. It's not pure dialogue. It's not Bohemian dialogue. It's like, how are we going to get this done? That's my idea of how you use conversations to collaborate. Jerry, you were talking about Australia. The same is true of North America, of Turtle Island. The entire continent was completely under care of, they used slash and burn agriculture. There were huge forests of perennial nuts and I mean, it was an abundance. And the Europeans didn't recognize how the whole continent had been shaped as a food farm. Anywhere you went, there was an abundance of food. So that's a different kind of collaboration. That's a collaboration with the land. That's a collaboration with the living environment that we're all immersed in that requires way different skills than simply talking together. Although if you look at ancient futures learning from Ladakh, before the road went through into the dock, these people were in such harmony with their environment. It would only hold a certain amount of people. If you exceeded that number of people, there'd be famine, there'd be problems. So they lived very much in balance. Women had multiple husbands, and the husbands spent time in monasteries, so they kept the population low. Everyone had a place to stay. Everyone had food in their stomach. Everyone had access to education. Then when the road went through and the West came in, and if you go to YouTube and you can Google Ancient Futures right from the dock, you can watch her movie. You'll see the weak link is the teenage boy. He's the one who says, I don't want to hold hands with my grandma. I don't want to wear traditional clothing. And he's got a pack of marbles rolled up in his t-shirt. He's trying to look tough and cool like James Dean, and that shattered everything. The entire irrigation system was designed such that if you were up there and you noticed that some water was draining out, you didn't call Public Works. You went over there and fixed it yourself. You collaborated with the entire community to keep the community intact. That was a real commons architecture and a real collaborative commons architecture. So I go on and on, but that's my take on where I come from on collaboration. And that's just a small part. There's lots more, but I will say one more thing. In humanizing the conversation around getting work done, the third conversation of coordinating actions, I need to know what you look like when you're really stressed. You're on your way to work and you get a speeding ticket, you get to work and your boss says, I need this done. And then you got a call from the principal's office and your kid's there and they want you in there right away. You're now like, oh my God. And if I notice you're stressed, I can come in and say, what do you need? How can I help you? I don't ignore you. And so this is really important. You have to decide how we're going to support each other through stressful times and how we're going to handle conflict, which is another completely separate and yet integrative part of that. So enough said.
I'm going to jump in just for a moment, please. Ken, that was beautiful.
Go
I
ahead.
think this is going to come down as one of those little clips. If you are practiced in saying that, awesome. If that was just an awesome riff, it was captured in such a compact and dense, perfect nutshell. You might want to go back and find that as like.
I've been doing this for 20 years, Scott. I talk about this all the time.
Well, okay, it came through. It came through. So here's a thought, and I think this is relating to Doug talking about the humanity of this. And I thought, is there anything that celebrates the human more than a deep, true collaboration? It could be designing a meal together. True respect, honoring, asking for the unique contribution and experience and perspective of your collaborative partner. That kind of gets at the root of it in a way, because I can't just have someone who's helping me do my thing. It's about us, and it's about me seeing you and honoring you and integrating your with mine. And like, how do we do that? And that's why I think it's so. Sean didn't say this, but the word that coming to mind is intimate. It really is when you really have that collaborative moment. It's so addictive because it's like we all have these walls between us and everyone else, and all of a sudden that wall isn't there anymore. Or that's what it feels like to me, is I'm actually seeing another person, and I'm taking parts of me and parts of them, and we're creating this third thing.
Thank you. Ken, have you written up or recorded, in particular, the part about the multiple conversations that teams need to have? Is that out in the world someplace?
In various places. I really should sit down and do what I just did here. This is the little graphic that I created many years ago, back in 2008. If you're having trouble coordinating your actions, go back and check, did you choose the right possibility? If you didn't choose it, did you generate it? If you didn't generate it, go back and check your shared understanding. So it also works backwards. And as I was developing this, I was reading Difficult Conversations, which is a great book, but it's got 13 steps. I don't know about you, my short-term memory does not handle 13 steps, man. I needed 4,
Thanks, Ken. Thanks a lot. Gil.
Yeah, good stuff. Scott, the that example of people cooking a meal together was one that rose in my mind earlier in this conversation, because there's a kind of seamless dance that can happen when that happens. And there's also the time when one person just wants to make a meal for everybody else and has a way they want to do it, and that's a gift too. So, wide range of delightfulness in human experience here, and of breakdown and suffering, and across this whole spectrum. Ken said he could go on at length about this, and he can, because the name of his business presence includes the word collaborate in it. So this guy's been there a long time. And I love the scheme. And Kenya, please do, craft something here. It's delicious. On the step of possibility, though, of asking what's possible here, it's really important that be asked in a way that doesn't shut down possibility and doesn't shut down creativity. And Ken and I hosted last month on Living Between Worlds a wacky guy named Stuart Hill. He's an 82-year-old emeritus professor. I knew him through the sustainable regenerative agriculture world decades ago. And he's got a bunch of tricks up his sleeve, one of which is he gathered together a bunch of farmers in Canada to talk about regenerative futures, and had them, there was lectures and there was discussions, there were small groups, and had people break up in small groups and talk about what they were doing and what they could do. And he said the mood of the room was just really down. It was boring, constrained. The conversations weren't interesting. People were taking very limited steps into what they thought was possible. And they shuffled the groups and asked people to tell the biggest possible lie they could about what they had done in some imagined future. And the vibe of the room changed completely. And there was laughter and play. And he talks about one guy who said, what I did was I ran a nature strip through my 20,000 acres, and the birds returned. And he spun a story with life and vibrancy in it that showed that he understood the whole ecological framework, that he was not operating as farm, and he had it as a vision, but it wasn't possible until he was invited to lie boldly about it. And so we did a show together about lying boldly as a tool for change. And I just want to add that to the question of thinking about what's possible, because you often want to break that open, because what's possible is constrained by history and experience and a fear of imagining. So, thanks, Ken.
Hi, can I just make a contribution? Can you hear me? I can't hear anyone at the moment.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, it's not collaboration, but something Ken said kind of reminded me something my father told me many moons ago. So my father was from the island of Rhodes, Rhodos in Greece, and at the end of the First World War and until the Second World War, it was given over to the Italians, and it was belonged to the Ottoman Empire before. Then it was given to the Italians, and then became Greek after the Second World War. So above where my father's village is a hill, which was, the Italians took it up and made it into a phenomenal garden place. It was really beautiful, whatever, which has since gone to ruin because it was never carried on by the Greeks or whatever. But one thing resonated with me. There's not so much collaboration, but achievement, perhaps forced collaboration, but whatever. And what it was, he said, the Italians had a different way of doing this, looking after the gardens. They allocated 150 meters of garden and width from the main road. There's a winding road going up. Every 150 meters was someone else was responsible for it. Those are gardeners specific to that. Because when Ken said, oh, when there's a problem, you call, I don't know, central departments or whatever. In that case, literally each person had, now, if you were to see the place, nothing would have happened without collaboration. But they were responsible directly for a piece of kind of garden, if you like. and apparently they were beautiful, but that's gone nowhere now. So I just thought there might be a slice and dice and collaborate aspect to this.
Go ahead, Scott.
I was going through my notes from the last meeting where I brought this up, and there were two comments that people had made that I would like to elaborate on. The first one is Gil. I'm going to probably misquote you here, so I'd like you to correct it if you feel like that's I'm hoping that Gil is still here. It was collaboration is a skill to develop. That's what I wrote down. And I believe it was part of a larger comment. And I don't know if you're still there, Gil.
Yes.
Okay. So I was wondering if
he's in an endless library that just goes back forever and ever.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm seeing your note taker.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
the dark screen. Okay, my
We're
bad.
both here.
Yes.
Don't be fooled.
So I'm curious if you could elaborate on what you mean by collaboration is a skill to develop, because my thought was, well, if you don't know what collaboration is, how can you develop the skill or know that you're getting better at it? But I'm very curious what your extended thoughts were on that, because it was kind of an offhand comment, I believe, that you made last time.
Maybe you have to know what it is, or maybe you have to have experienced it and say, oh, I like that. I want to do more of that. I think, I think Ken spoke very well to some of what developing the skill looks like. And, that's a framework for cultivating it in a group, or maybe educating people in it, but people also have the experience in real life. I mean, kindergarten, man, that's some of what that's about. And there's
that helps. I think that connects to my sense that it's rare and precious and delightful, and that when you experience it, like, oh yeah, I want more, please.
Yeah, and there are ways of cultivating relationships and conversations and teams and organizations and so forth that nurture it more or less. So there are the skills of collaboration, and there's the meta skills of cultivating collaboration in the sense that we're talking about it here. And I'm struck throughout this whole conversation at how easy it is for us to generalize about what's so, but the range of human experience is vast around this. We have the full spectrum from brutal authoritarian to playful inventing together. They're all there. We've probably all experienced some flavors of many of those. And so what's interesting is, well, kind of, Ken, where are your questions? I want to look at them again. Why are we here? What is it that we want? Bob Dunham talks about for the sake of what as the question behind every interaction. And it's usually tacit, and it's sometimes useful to surface it, or at least to be aware of it, because that then provides the basis of, well, if we're here for similar things, we care about similar things, even if we have apparent differences. And this is where the United Front game comes in the current political situation pre-yesterday in the United States, of people who seem to fiercely disagree about certain things, but who actually care very similarly about some things, that maybe sometimes possibly provides an opening for collaboration even across difference, which is where it gets really interesting, because if we're all in agreement on everything, collaboration is one thing. But if we're different, whether in perspective or cultural background or age or gender, or the many different things we can be different on, and still find ways to collaborate around common concerns, that's where human being gets really interesting to me.
Yeah, I don't think that we can collaborate if we're both the same. I think it depends on the difference. It is the bringing together of the difference.
Well, we're never the same and not the same, right?
Yeah. Yes. So what that brought to mind for me is, I think this was the emotion that I was feeling when I initially started thinking about this. I'm frustrated because I hear people using the word collaboration as something of a tease to get other people to work for them. And I think, oh, hey, let's collaborate on this. And I think, okay, that was really fun. I want more of that. I enjoy that experience. This is great. We're going to do a little mind meld. We're going to come up with something. And then I show up and it's like, no, that's not what we're doing at all. This is about me wanting you to be part of my thing. And I thought, oh, that's not what I was hoping this was going to be. Um, uh, yeah, we used to have a phrase at my corporate job. I've been partnered. Will,
Nice.
will you partner with me on this? And it's like that usually meant that I'm getting screwed and you're doing the telling me what to do. But I had to voluntarily say, yes, I will partner with you. And now never worked out so well for the one who had been partnered.
Good sign of a dysfunctional culture when you start developing internal jargon like that. Dave.
And I'm sorry I'm late, so you guys may have already covered all this stuff, but this is
We did. We
it's
fixed the whole issue. It's
I was
done.
thinking you probably have already gotten there, so I'll just put icing on the top or something like that. But Scott, this is like a topic I'm really, really curious about too. And I feel like I wonder. I mean, one of the questions is I don't know whether you guys narrowed the definition of collaboration before I got here or not, but I think Gil's right. We've been doing. I mean, collaboration is like what we do, right? And so whether you want to call it slavery or the market or the assembly line, or I mean, these are all technologies we've developed for collaboration, right? And I would argue pretty well supported, I think, that the most effective collaboration we have is the multinational corporation, right? It's hugely successful. And costs are the lowest and production is the highest. And you want something done, get a multinational corporation to do it for you. And so kind of all of the Ezra Klein stuff around abundance is part of what's happened is we've tried to fight back against multinational corporations by helping little companies and stuff do things, but it turns out they're not as efficient. They're not as good at what they do, and so we have all these technologies. And I guess what's motivated me the last couple of decades is that I got all excited about the open collaboration stuff that we were doing at the beginning of the web. Wikipedia and Linux and those kinds of things. And so there was a particular category of collaboration by choice or something like that I was really interested in. And I thought, oh, this is the answer to everything, everything will be a wiki. And it turns out over the last 25 years or 30 years, right, that's not true. There's very few wikis out there that are successful, right? There's very little collaboration, Scott, I'd say, at that level that has been kind of, spontaneously combusted. And it's like, what the fuck happened? Why is this so hard? And I feel like for a while we thought we needed to open things. And so there was like a licensing answer, right? If you could put a Creative Commons license on it, that'll be good, right? And now we can collaborate. But it turns out that just means it's open. Nobody wants to play with it because it's like, I think your point is it's somebody else's thing. I'm not going to rewrite their book. So it's not, and the question is exactly, why did Wikipedia work? But give me an example of the second Wikipedia, right? What's another Wikipedia, right? We have many successful examples in software, I would argue. And I would say the difference in software is there's a business model that explains participation, right? I can satisfy I can scratch some of my own itch in a software context that motivates me to participate in making the software better. So the point of collaboration has to be to make an asset better, is my theory, right? And we have to have some mechanism, right, that motivates my participation in making it better. And so for some reason, Wikipedia works, people get excited about making it better, boom, great. In Linux, people, and again, most of Linux contributions are large corporations, right? There's a number of folks who just do it on their own, but in general, it's large corporations investing because they're going to get benefit from Linux. And software kind of, I think, has that energy. WordPress is a really good example, right? Where you have a lot of collaboration around the platform, but people make money out of it. They have consulting businesses and stuff. They sell products. There's an ecosystem of profit basically that enables it. But I think we've done that reasonably rarely, and it seems like a skill set that we really ought to be much, much better at.
Dave, you may have peeled back the lid on 3 or 4 cans of worms right there. I'll let Scott take a start. Scott did start by refining the definition and differentiating collaboration from teamwork. I'm going to project what Scott might say and then turn it over to Scott. But corporations very much have distinct roles. I think Scott would talk about them as teamwork, where in teamwork, if you can replace somebody with someone else and the output doesn't change, that's just teamwork. And collaboration requires the individuals to be involved and interchange so much that the replacement of an individual changes the outcome remarkably. So I think the market and corporations don't fall into collaboration in Scott's definition. But Scott, take it away, please.
You nailed it, Jerry. That's perfect. So the only thing I'll mention is I have that one other thing I want to talk about that came up from the last meeting. However, we have Ken and Doug, who I'm assuming are commenting on what just came. So I don't want to fracture that.
Cool. And I also want to mention that next week I'm attending an event in the Bay Area. I'll be in the Bay Area all next week, actually staying with Dave and Claudia. So thank you, Dave. And so anybody who wants to meet up with me in the Bay Area LMK, and let's schedule something. But also, I can start the call next week, but I'm gonna have to hand it off pretty early, and I'm happy to experiment if anybody wants to run OGM next week. So let me know that as well. Ken, please.
If someone has something that's related to what Dave just said, please go, because I was going to introduce a different point here. Or not.
Go for it.
Okay. I'm a bit of a word nerd, and 30 years ago, I was working on a project where we decided we needed to teach people about conflict resolution. So I went to Etymology Online. Actually, at that point, it wasn't Etymology Online. I went to the dictionary, and I found out that conflict and resolution, when combined, if you look at the roots, it actually means to resolve to be in conflict. And my partner, Gene Dunaway, who Gilfriend knows quite well, and I said, that's a terrible root for this. So we need a different root. So we came up with collaborative reconciliation. And we chose collaborative because to collaborate means to work together. That's the first definition. And the second definition is to work with the enemy. And so when you have somebody that you perceive as an opponent or an enemy, you need to learn to work with them. This is a different kind of operation than excluding them, because you got to work with them. They're part of your ecosystem. And reconcile means to make friendly again. So to work with the enemy to become friends again is the point for me of anything to do with conflict. If it exacerbates the conflict, it's not resolving it. And if it is helping people to say, oh, you know what, I'm stuck on my point, my ego, my whatever it is, and I see the validity and legitimacy of this other person's point, even if I don't agree with it, that tends to loosen things up a little bit and lets them move in a different direction in a collaborative way towards some kind of becoming friends again.
What was your alternative to conflict resolution?
Collaborative reconciliation.
Collaborative reconciliation. Okay.
And part of that comes from tradition Jerry talks about often, which is the Quakers. They have a process. The Quakers are on consensus, which doesn't mean 33-1 is a tie. It means if somebody's like, I'm not sure about this, but I won't block it. However, I want to keep grappling with it. They call it grappling, and they keep unpacking and talking until they finally come to some kind of agreement on what that means. And that can be a very long process, which I think is another thing working against us. In a capitalist society, time is money. And so you don't have time. And this is when I present my model of conversations to potential clients, they always say, we don't have time for all that. We've got too much to do. And my comeback is always, how often do you have to redo your work? And they say pretty often. I'm like, well, if you didn't have to redo it, would it be worth your time and investment? No, yeah, it might. And so that's how I overcome the objection.
I'm reminded of Oscar Wilde's quote, which I can never quite remember, but I'm going to try to ingrain it now. The problem with socialism is that it takes too many evenings. This community thing, the thing about collaborating and building links and learning to trust each other is time consuming. And there's so many Netflix series you got to get through, or World of Warcraft or Roblox or whatever it is we're on, right? So uncomfortable. Doug.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a take that emerged out of a lot of the work I've been doing with partners over the last few years. And if there's truly sort of I think to Ken's earlier contribution about if there's truly, shared clarity and commitment on a personal level to the collective mission, whatever that is. When there's a conflict, which for me isn't about, the sort of first tier polarity involved, but conflict as in when somebody is triggered, because that's usually the active ingredient. We developed a practice of basically it's a full stop. And whatever that was going on, it's a full stop. And the reason for that is because if somebody was triggered, they just left the team. They just left whatever the collective endeavor is, and they're now facing internally 100%. So we're down a person, and it doesn't make sense to proceed down a person. And so that person has an opportunity to share and to be heard. It is not an opportunity for anybody to respond or to try to fix it or to reflect back or to do anything. They just get an opportunity to really share, be heard. There's a pause. And then there's an opportunity for people to ask questions, but those questions are to make sure they got what was shared. They understand what that person is experiencing, was feeling, and what was triggering to them. In that, it's related to as a gift. Because if that person was triggered internally, then leaving the risk of that triggering happening again in the future, either with them or somebody else or somebody external to the organization, is at the expense of the whole endeavor and everybody in it. So if we trigger not constructive or helpful, let's figure out how to take care of that right now so that at least that triggering is off the table. And the only reason I'm sharing this is because it affords a recontextualization that over time builds strength, builds resistance, builds trust, builds connection. It really deepens the power of the collective. Because in working through that, in sharing that, in receiving and holding it as a gift to the whole, it sort of inverts the orientation to dissent and disruption. And I'm not sure how that plugged into this flow, but it seemed something to share. I'm complete.
Thanks, Doug.
Hey, Pete, I think you should go, and then I'll introduce this other thing to kind of wrap us up.
Thanks, Scott. Real quick, I wanted to pick up two things I mentioned in chat and also a little bit expand or build on something Dave said. One of them, two different kinds of collaboration, which we didn't quite hit on here, which I'm experienced with and I wanted to share about. One of them was one of the most fun things I ever did was in my 20s. I worked selling big software products, and I was a member of a 4 or 5 person sales team. We would meet with a 4 or 5 person purchasing team, and after same thing, pitching to VCs kind of. After 5 or 10 pitches together, you kind of knew the way your team worked, and it felt like a collaboration. It felt like a basketball team or a football soccer team, where I knew what I could talk about effectively, and I knew what somebody else could talk about effectively, and vice versa. And we could pass the topic, and we did it very gracefully and without the other team really knowing what was going on, how we were playing. And they were doing the same thing on the other side. So one of the things that I really enjoyed about that was not only playing positions really well and passing the ball really well, the topics and conversations really well, but also the fact that we were doing it together. Some of the most fun I ever had was with a really good purchasing team, and I could kind of see what they were trying to do and where they were going and how they were passing the ball, and I kind of couldn't. Some of the things that they were doing were ineffable and something I couldn't really know. I remember working, one of the teams we worked with, I think, was a big company like Intel or something like that. And they were digging us on price. And I had this sense, I could tell that they were exceptionally professional about their ability to nail somebody on price and just drive it down and drive it down. Like, hey, we're Intel. We can tell you what the price is going to be, and it's going to be much lower than your cost. I'm sorry. But they played around with us, and we were a little scrappy startup, so we fought valiantly. And so I had this sense of them kind of like a tiger holding an antelope's neck in its mouth, and they were kind of playing with us, but they didn't actually crunch down and break our neck. They kind of like, okay, we get it. You guys are so cute. We're going to pay at least your cost, maybe a little under, maybe a little bit over, but we're not going to completely screw you. We're not going to kill you. So those, some of the most fun I had was that dual level collaboration. Another thing that Dave touched on a little bit with open source software, I wanted to mention, especially much smaller projects, sometimes even 2 or 3 person projects, but sometimes 100-person projects. Open source software, and especially the GitForge pull request kind of collaboration is another like dramatically wonderful human thing that I've experienced that I think most people don't experience. And I want to at least kind of like tell it to you and give you a little taste of it. The way it works is not unlike the sales team. You learn your position, you learn the lingo, you learn the plays, but you learn them in your team, and then you can go to an away team that knows nothing about you, except that they've learned the same kind of collaboration patterns, the lingo and the meanings of different words and how things fit together. You can go over to their GitHub repo or whatever, and plug yourself right in. Not like you're a team member, but like you're a full collaborator. You're bringing a way of playing the game. You're looking at what they've built already. You can plug yourself in without talking to them, without knowing who they are, without ever meeting them, and accomplish meaningful work and move the product forward, with this very light collaboration. And literally, I've done that over and over, where I go over to a team and I'm like, hey, I can move the ball down the field this way. And they're like, wow, I didn't expect that. That's amazing. And the signaling, the coordination needed for that is like really light touch. It's like, here's a feature, here's my pull request, this is what it addresses. And their thing is pretty much tweak this, tweak that if you could, and then looks good to me. LGTM is the way that they kind of accept a pull request. And it's really cool because it's a deep collaboration, and it's really cool because it's with a team that you don't even know. You don't know where they live in the world. You don't know what they like, what they don't like. You just know that you're both working together to move this product forward. It's a wonderful and amazing thing. Thanks.
Love that. Thank you. Scott, do you mind if Stacy sneaks in before?
I don't mind. I will make my comment at the end.
All right.
Just real quickly, I just want to throw a marker down because Doug said he wasn't sure where his comment fits in. So I just want to throw a marker down because we didn't talk about the notion of, getting credit and ownership and property and things like that. And I just want to say that I think what Doug touched upon is this idea of the environment or the work community of a group. And so at some later date, I think we should talk about that, because what Doug brings up is the feel of when a group works together, of that interconnectedness, which touches upon what Ken was talking about and why everybody is there and what brings them there. So I just wanted to highlight that, for lack of a better word. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. Gil, quickly.
Quickly, Pete, talking about moving the ball down the court took me from the metaphor of basketball to the actual game of basketball. And I'm struck that how, a player can be traded from one team to another and play on the new team. There's something shared. And Kevin, it's not automated by any means, but there's shared language, syntax, ways of moving, and so forth. And yet, you still find that teams play in really different ways. The Warriors, at the peak of their game, when they won, I don't know how many championships in a row, there was something almost telepathic and balletic about watching them play.
Sure, that was collaboration, not coordination. But anyway, that's fine.
Whatever you want to call it. It was ballet. I mean, I think of the Brazilian.
Sure.
Pele was playing. There's something that is able to emerge in how people play together.
Yeah.
It's like jazz. There's a common language. There's a common syntax. There's moves that they drill in a very regimented and maybe almost mechanistic way, like a musician learning scales, that enable something to emerge both individually as a musician and together in a jazz combo or an improv group or something like that. So
I just want to bring in, in the collaborations I work in, there's often people you're opposing and you have to stop them doing bad things. And that hasn't been mentioned. We're working against the Tourism Development Authority that has this new fund set up. They get, in a good year, $40 million from hotel tax, and they won't pay anything for workforce housing for the people working in hotels. And they've got this fund set up to it, and they just make it more marketing. And so as we do housing, we're going to have to stop them doing what they're doing with this fund that was set up with one goal, because what they have is 7 hoteliers, one nice but not very smart county commissioner, and one citizen who no one listens to. So, I mean, a lot of collaboration. If you want to get stuff done, you have to stop bad things from happening, and you know who they are. And we haven't talked about that at all.
Mm-hmm. Scott, I think you've got the last word here, and then I'm hoping Ken has a poem for us. You are still muted.
The last word, I'm sorry, is related to a comment that was made last call where I brought up this idea. And it was something like, if you don't hear things that make you feel uncomfortable, then your group isn't big enough. And I was thinking about that and the nature of collaboration. And is the point to get more and more and more opinions? Or is there a limit to the size of a collaboration that actually is a collaboration? And I'll leave you with that open-ended thought.
Thank you. Like Quaker advices, which they do sometimes at the end of meeting. They'll have like queries or advices, which are just things to ponder.
I can speak to that, Scott. I spent a decade of my life developing something called the World Cafe dialogue process. The World Cafe dialogue process is really great for sharing meaning. It's really great for exploring possibility. It's really great for learning and reflecting. It's terrible for coordinating action. Okay. Look at the social brain. Robin Dunbar is one of the authors, 2 other women from Oxford there. They talk about the Dunbar number. When it comes to coordinating action, 5 is optimal. And if you have more than 5, then break it into groups of 5 with break into groups of 15 with people coming into that group of 5 to coordinate the next ring out. So yes, there are very definite limits in coordinating action, unless it's incredibly clear how people are supposed to act. There's a story about First Nations people in this country before the arrival of the Europeans. They would just get a sense that things were out of balance. And so all these tribes would come together and they'd spend days listening to each other. And they'd start with listening to the young people, and they'd end with listening to the grandparents. Usually the grandmothers had the last word. And they didn't have planning notebooks and they didn't have strategic plans. But once they talked for a few weeks, they knew they could put things back in balance, and they would go back into the world and things would be in balance until the next time they felt the need. So there's another woo-woo layer of collaboration there, of knowing the field, of sensing what's going on in the field there that most of us have lost contact with. Anyway,
Are you saying they didn't even have whiteboards?
they didn't even have whiteboards, and now they didn't even have markers.
Damn. Oh my God. No dry erase?
But occasionally one warrior would write somebody's name in the snow, just so you know.
In blood or pee?
It's a song by Chet
Oh.
Atkins, I Still Write Your Name in the Snow. It's a great tune.
Shoot.
Check it out.
Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to read one of my poems. It may actually fit. I call this Conspiracy of Silence. It's been quite a while since I was among people where we were all silent together. I'm feeling a need to join with such people now. I'm feeling a need to be with people who are willing to shut up for a while. To be with people who want to be quiet. People who want to be still for a bit. I'm feeling a need to be with people who want to resist the impulse to make sudden moves. I'm feeling a need to be with people who want to spend more time and effort on understanding than they do on explaining. And to those people, I offer this invitation and invocation. Let us come together in silence and breathe deeply. Let us breathe deeply until we can stand with ease inside each of us. Let us breathe deeply until we can stand with ease connecting each other. Let us breathe deeply until we can look into each other's eyes and not flinch. Let us breathe deeply until we can talk about what we see in each other's eyes. Let us breathe deeply until we can breathe together in peace. Let us breathe deeply until we can breathe peace into the world. And most of all, let us breathe deeply until we can feel the world breathe peace into us.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you all. Again, next week, if anybody has a thought and wants to run the call, let me know. And thank you for another very nice OGMA exploration. Really appreciate it.
Ciao.
An
Thanks,
idea
everyone.
is how to collaborate to oppose.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic.
I
Thanks,
like
Kevin.
that a lot.